The ghost signal. The silence of deep space had never bothered Chief Monitor Thessa before. In her 12 years stationed at Outpost Meridian, she had grown comfortable with the endless void that stretched beyond the Caldrian Empire's borders. The monitoring station floated at the very edge of explored space, a lonely sentinel watching over nothing in particular. Most days were filled with routine scans, equipment maintenance, and the occasional passing comet. Nothing ever happened out here. Nothing ever would. Until tonight. Thessa sat at her console, reviewing the daily sensor logs with practiced efficiency. Her three eyes moved across the holographic displays, checking energy readings, gravitational fluctuations, and subspace distortions. Everything appeared normal. The stars burned with their usual intensity, the darkness remained dark. Then, without warning, her primary sensor array began to pulse with an alert she had never seen before. At first, she thought it was a malfunction. The equipment at Outpost Meridian was old, constantly in need of repairs that never came. Imperial Command rarely sent supplies this far out. But when she ran a diagnostic, every system reported perfect functionality. The alert was real. Something was out there. Thessa leaned forward, her long fingers dancing across the control interface. She isolated the signal and enhanced it. The readings made no sense. A massive energy signature was approaching from deep space, from a direction where no known civilization existed. The object was enormous, easily the size of an Imperial battlecruiser, but its energy output was unlike anything in the Empire's database. "Computer, identify vessel type," she commanded, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. The station's artificial intelligence processed the request for several long moments. When it finally responded, its synthetic voice carried an unusual hesitation. "Vessel type unknown. Hull composition unrecognized. Energy signature does not match any known species in the Galactic Registry. Warning, design elements suggest pre-purge human technology." Thessa's blood ran cold. Human technology? That was impossible. Humanity had been wiped out 400 years ago during the Great Purge, when the Caldrian Empire led a coalition of alien species to eliminate what they called the human threat. The history was clear. Earth was bombarded until its surface turned to glass. The human colonies scattered across a dozen worlds had been systematically destroyed. Every ship, every station, every trace of humanity had been erased from existence. Or so everyone believed. With shaking hands, Thessa pulled up the historical archives. Images filled her screens, showing the final days of the human wars. She saw recordings of human warships, sleek and deadly, unlike the bulky vessels most species preferred. The design philosophy was unmistakable. Efficiency, speed, and overwhelming firepower packed into deceptively small frames. She compared those ancient images to the sensor readings of the approaching vessel. The similarities were undeniable. The energy distribution patterns, the hull geometry, even the faint electromagnetic signature all pointed to human origin. But that couldn't be right. Humans were extinct, dead, gone forever. "Computer, verify sensor accuracy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All sensors operating within normal parameters. The detected vessel is real and approaching at sublight speed. Estimated time to visual range, 42 minutes. Thessa knew she should contact Imperial Command immediately, but something held her back. If she reported a human vessel and turned out to be wrong, she would become a laughingstock. False alarms from remote outposts were not treated kindly. Officers had been demoted for less. Yet if she was right and said nothing, the consequences could be catastrophic. She made her decision. Activating the emergency channel, she sent a priority transmission toward the nearest Imperial fleet base, 3 light-years away. It would take hours for the message to reach them, and hours more for any response. She was on her own. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Thessa watched as the mysterious vessel drew closer, its massive form gradually resolving on her long-range scanners. It moved with purpose, not the random drift of a derelict ship. Someone was piloting it. Someone was coming to Imperial space deliberately. When the ship finally appeared on her visual displays, Thessa gasped. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The hull was dark, almost black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange markings covered its surface, symbols in a language that the station's computer could not translate. The ship's design was angular and aggressive, built for war, and along its side, barely visible against the dark metal, was a symbol that made Thessa's heart skip a beat. A blue and white circle. A planet. Earth. "This is Chief Monitor Thessa of Caldraean Outpost Meridian," she broadcast on all frequencies, trying to keep her voice steady. "Unidentified vessel, you are entering Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately or be classified as hostile." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then her communication system crackled to life, and a voice emerged from the static. It was unlike anything Thessa had ever heard. Deep, measured, and undeniably alien in its cadence. But more than that, it carried a weight of authority that made her instinctively straighten in her chair. "This is the UHSV Retribution, Terran Defense Fleet, Commander Marcus Vale, commanding." Thessa felt her breath catch. Terran. Human. The word she never expected to hear again in her lifetime. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Humanity was destroyed 4 centuries ago." There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it carried an edge of cold amusement. "Your history is incomplete, Monitor Thessa. We survived. We endured. And now we have returned." "How?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "How did you survive? Where have you been?" "When your empire bombarded Earth, not all humanity was on the homeworld. Exodus fleets carrying millions of our people escaped into deep space before the final strikes. For 400 years, we have hidden beyond your borders, rebuilding, growing stronger, waiting for the day we could return. That day has come." Thessa's mind raced. If humans had survived, if they had been building in secret for centuries, what kind of technology might they have developed? The ship before her was proof enough of their advancement. Its energy readings suggested power systems far beyond anything the Caldraean Empire possessed. Why reveal yourselves now? Why come back after all this time? Because the galaxy must know the truth. Because those who tried to exterminate us must face justice. Because humanity will not hide in the darkness any longer. Commander Vale's words were hard as steel. "Your empire committed genocide, Monitor Thessa. 4 billion human lives ended in flames. Worlds reduced to ash. Children, families, entire civilizations erased from existence. Did you think there would be no accounting for that?" Guilt twisted in Thessa's chest. She had not been alive during the purge, but she had learned about it in school. The official histories called it a necessary action, a preventative strike against a species too violent and unpredictable to coexist with others. But sitting here, face to face with a survivor of that attempted extinction, the justifications felt hollow. "I had no part in what happened," she said quietly. "I was not even born." "Neither were most of my crew," Vale replied. "Yet we carry the weight of our ancestors' suffering. Your empire must do the same." On her sensors, Thessa detected energy building in the human ship's primary systems. Weapons coming online, defensive shields activating. The Retribution was preparing for combat, and her small outpost had nothing that could stand against such a vessel. "Please," she said, abandoning all pretense of military protocol.
Don't attack. I am alone here. This station is unarmed. Whatever message you want to send, my death will not accomplish it." Another pause, longer this time. Then the energy readings began to drop. The human ship was powering down its weapons. "You are not our enemy, Thessa. We are merely the first to know we have returned. Tell your empire this: humanity seeks acknowledgement of the crimes committed against us. We seek a place in the galactic community that was stolen from us. We seek justice, not revenge. But we will have one or the other." "And if the Empire refuses?" Thessa asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then the galaxy will know why our species was once feared. We are not the same humans your—"
She thought about Commander Vale's words, justice or revenge. Either option spelled disaster for the Chaldean Empire. How could they fight an enemy they could not see? How could they negotiate with a species they had tried to exterminate? How could they possibly make amends for the deaths of billions? The answer, she realized with growing dread, was that they probably could not. The Empire had sown the wind 400 years ago when they launched the Great Purge. Now the whirlwind had returned, and it wore a human face. Her communication console suddenly lit up with incoming transmissions. Imperial Command had finally received her initial message and was demanding a full report. Fleet admirals wanted tactical data. Intelligence officers wanted confirmation. Politicians wanted reassurance that this was all a mistake. But Thessa knew better. This was no mistake. This was the beginning of something that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had survived, had thrived in exile, had returned with capabilities that surpassed anything the Empire possessed. And they were angry. She began composing her report, knowing that every word she wrote would be scrutinized by the highest levels of Imperial government. How did you tell an entire civilization that the ghosts they thought they had buried were coming back for answers? How did you explain that the greatest victory in Imperial history might have been its greatest mistake? As dawn broke over the distant Chaldean homeworld, millions of light-years away, Thessa finished her report with a single line that would echo through history. "They were supposed to be extinct. They are not. May the ancestors help us all." The ghost signal had been received. The message had been delivered, and somewhere in the darkness beyond Imperial space, dozens more human ships waited in silence, ready to remind the galaxy of a simple truth that should never have been forgotten. You cannot kill an idea, you cannot destroy a dream, and you certainly cannot exterminate humanity. The Empire would learn this lesson soon enough. The Empire's fear. The emergency session of the Chaldean Imperial Council convened within hours of Chief Monitor Thessa's report reaching the capital world of Caldros Prime. The Grand Chamber, built from crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in thousands of directions, had witnessed centuries of important decisions. Wars had been declared here, peace treaties signed, species welcomed into the galactic fold, or cast out into exile. But never, in all its long history, had the chamber held such an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Emperor Zolrath sat upon his elevated throne, his forearms resting on the armrests with practiced calm that belied the churning anxiety in his gut. He was old, even by Chaldean standards, having ruled for nearly 60 years. He had been a young soldier during the final years of the Great Purge, had seen human vessels burn in the void, and celebrated when Earth's surface turned to molten glass. He remembered the victory parades, the speeches about making the galaxy safe, the relief that the human threat had been neutralized forever. Now, that relief felt like a cruel joke. Below him, arranged in concentric circles, sat the most powerful beings in the Empire. Military commanders, planetary governors, intelligence directors, and diplomatic envoys all waited for him to speak. The holographic display at the chamber's center showed the recording Thessa had sent, played and replayed a dozen times already. The dark human ship,
The voice of Commander Marcus Vale, the impossible claim that humanity had survived. "Show me the historical files," Zolrath commanded, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. The hologram shifted, displaying images that most citizens of the Empire never saw. The official histories taught that humanity had been a violent, expansionist species that threatened galactic stability. The truth, locked away in classified archives, was far more complicated. The recordings showed human colonies thriving on distant worlds, cities filled with millions going about their lives, children playing in parks, families gathering for meals, scientists making discoveries, artists creating beauty. And then came the images of the Purge, Imperial warships appearing in orbit, bombardments beginning without warning, entire worlds burning while desperate evacuation ships tried to flee, human defenders fighting with courage born of desperation, knowing they could not win, but fighting anyway to buy time for others to escape. Admiral Kess, commander of the Imperial Third Fleet, broke the heavy silence. She was a warrior through and through, her scarred carapace testament to dozens of battles. The historical records confirm that several human Exodus fleets escaped our initial strikes. We tracked 3 of them into deep space but lost contact at the edge of known space. Command at the time determined pursuit was unnecessary. We believed they would die in the void. She paused, mandibles clicking with frustration. We were wrong. "How many ships?" Zolrath asked quietly. "Unknown, Your Majesty. The human evacuation was chaotic. They had no central coordination. Some fleets went in completely different directions. Our intelligence suggested perhaps 50,000 humans escaped Earth itself. Colony worlds might have evacuated hundreds of thousands more before we reached them. And now, 400 years later, how many might there be?" The chamber fell silent as everyone performed the same grim calculation. 50,000 humans given 400 years to reproduce and spread across hidden worlds could easily number in the billions by now, perhaps tens of billions, an entire civilization grown in secret, nursing 400 years of justified grievance. Minister Vex, head of Imperial intelligence, stepped forward. His species was known for cautious thinking and thorough analysis, traits that had served the Empire well for generations. "Your Majesty, we must consider the technological implications. The vessel detected by Monitor Thessa possessed capabilities that exceed our own by a considerable margin. Its stealth systems, power output, and hull composition all suggest advancement far beyond where humanity was when the Purge occurred." "How is that possible?" demanded Governor Thresh, her voice sharp with disbelief. "We possess 400 years of scientific progress. We have incorporated technology from a dozen species. How could a few refugees hiding in the darkness surpass us?" Vex's expression was grim. "Necessity, Governor. The Empire has grown comfortable. We face no significant external threats. Our military developments have been incremental, focused on maintaining existing superiority. But humans fleeing extinction would have no such luxury. Every advance in technology would mean the difference between survival and death. Every scientific breakthrough would be desperately needed. They had the ultimate motivation: ensure it never happens again." Zolrath absorbed this, his mind working through the implications. An enemy that could not be detected by conventional sensors, ships that exceeded Imperial capabilities, a population that had grown for centuries with a singular purpose: survive and eventually return. And underlying it all, a moral debt that could never be repaid. "What do they want?" he asked, directing the question to his diplomatic corps. Ambassador Sellen, who had studied human culture extensively before the Purge, spoke carefully. Commander Vale's message mentioned justice and acknowledgement. Human psychology places great emphasis on recognition of wrongs committed. They need us to admit what we did, to acknowledge the crime. And if we do, if we make this ignition, then we open ourselves to consequences we cannot predict. Other species may question our legitimacy, our own populations may begin examining other aspects of Imperial history, the political ramifications would be enormous. And if we refuse? Zalrath pressed. Admiral Kess answered this time. Then we face war with an enemy we cannot see, using weapons we do not understand, fighting for their very existence. Your Majesty, we train for many scenarios, but there is no tactical doctrine for fighting ghosts who possess superior technology and 400 years of rage. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing stellar charts of the Empire's borders, nearly 300 inhabited worlds, home to over 50 species, protected by the largest military fleet in known space, all of it suddenly feeling vulnerable in ways it never had before. We tried to exterminate them once. We failed. What makes anyone in this chamber believe we could succeed now when they are stronger and we know nothing of their true numbers or capabilities? No one answered. The admission hung in the air like smoke. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The communication officer looked up, her face pale. Your Majesty, we are receiving a broadcast on all Imperial channels, military, civilian, diplomatic, every frequency simultaneously. And the encryption? There is no encryption. They want everyone to hear this. Put it through, Zalrath ordered, steeling himself. The hologram shifted once more, and a human face appeared. Commander Marcus Vale looked exactly as Thessa had described. Strong features, dark hair touched with gray, and eyes that had seen too much suffering. He wore a uniform of deep...
People of the Caldrian Empire and allied species, my name is Commander Marcus Vale of the United Human Survival Fleet. For 400 years, my people have lived in exile, driven from our worlds by those who feared us. We were hunted, scattered, nearly destroyed. Our crime was being different. Our punishment was meant to be extinction. Vale paused, letting his words sink in. But we survived. In the darkness beyond your borders, we built new homes. We raised children who knew Earth only from stories. We preserved our culture, our history, our dreams. And we never forgot what was taken from us. The image shifted, showing recordings that made Zalrath's blood run cold. Human families torn apart during evacuations, children crying as their worlds burned, desperate ships trying to escape orbital bombardment. These were human recordings, preserved across centuries, showing the purge from the other side. 4 billion humans died during your Great Purge, Vale continued, his voice now carrying steel beneath the calm. 63 worlds reduced to ash, hundreds of space stations destroyed, an entire civilization nearly erased because we were deemed too dangerous to exist. He leaned forward slightly. But here is what you did not understand about humanity. We do not die easily. We adapt. We endure. We remember. The image showed human ships, dozens of them, emerging from the darkness like predators revealing themselves. Each bore the symbol of Earth. Each looked as deadly as the retribution. We do not seek revenge, Vale said, though his tone suggested that had been a close decision. We seek acknowledgement. We seek truth. We demand that the Caldrian Empire and its allies admit what was done, that you tell your people the real history of the Great Purge, that you acknowledge the genocide you committed. Another pause, this one carrying weight that pressed down on everyone watching. We also demand representation, a voice in galactic affairs, the return of colony sites that once were human worlds, and guarantees, backed by more than promises, that no species will ever suffer what we endured. The image of Vale grew closer, more intimate, as if he were speaking directly to each viewer. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering if we can be defeated again. You're calculating whether your fleets can find and destroy us before we become a real threat. You're debating whether to negotiate or attack. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let me save you some time. You cannot find all of us. Our ships can hide where your sensors cannot reach. Our technology surpasses yours in ways that would take decades for you to match. And every human alive remembers the burning of Earth. We will not be victims again. The transmission shifted one final time, showing a star system no Caldrian recognized. Dozens of human vessels orbited massive space stations. Shipyards churned out new vessels. Cities sprawled across 3 different planets, their lights visible from space. This was not a handful of refugees hiding in the dark. This was a civilization reborn. We are giving the Chaldean Empire 1 standard year to respond to our demands, Vale concluded. Use that time wisely. Consult your historians. Ask them to tell you the truth about what happened. And then decide, do you want peace with humanity, or do you want to discover what 400 years of preparation has made us capable of? The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial Council chamber in stunned silence. Emperor Zalrath sat motionless on his throne, processing what he had just witnessed. This was not a minor crisis that could be resolved with diplomacy or force. This was a fundamental challenge to the Empire's legitimacy, its power, and its future. Opinions, he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Kess spoke first, her warrior instincts demanding action. We should mobilize immediately. Find their hidden systems before they grow stronger. Strike now while we might still have numerical advantage. And if we cannot find them, countered Ambassador Selen, if our fleets search for years while human ships strike at our worlds with impunity, we would be fighting shadows while our economy collapsed and our people lived in fear. We could acknowledge their demands, suggested Minister Vex carefully. The truth about the purge exists in our archives. We could release it, offer reparations, negotiate territory. That would destroy us, snapped Governor Thresh. The moment we admit to genocide, every species we rule will question our authority. The Empire would fracture. Perhaps, Zalrath said quietly, silencing the growing argument, perhaps we would finally address the rot at our Empire's foundation. Perhaps we would become something better than we are. He stood, his aged body straightening with effort. 400 years ago, my generation made a choice. We decided that destroying an entire species was preferable to coexisting with them. We told ourselves it was necessary, justified, even righteous. We lied to ourselves and to history. The Emperor's words shocked the chamber into silence. Never had they heard him question Imperial doctrine so directly. Now those lies have returned to haunt us, he continued. Humanity has given us a choice, just as we once made a choice about them. We can acknowledge the truth and face the consequences, or we can repeat our ancestors' mistakes and attempt extinction again. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of his advisors one by one. But understand this, whatever we choose for every future generation of Chaldeans. We choose what kind of civilization we will be. Admiral Kess stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, what if acknowledging the truth is not enough for them? What if they want blood? Zalrath's expression was unreadable. Then perhaps we should ask ourselves, would we not want the same if our positions were reversed? The question hung unanswered in the crystalline chamber as Emperor Zalrath dismissed the council to consider their options. Outside, across 300 worlds, billions of Imperial citizens had just learned a truth their government had hidden for centuries. Humanity was alive. Humanity remembered. And humanity was no longer running. In the darkness of space, aboard the UHSV Retribution, Commander Marcus Vale watched sensor readings showing the chaos their broadcast had caused. Communication networks across the Empire were overloaded with traffic. Some voices called for war, others for peace. Many simply expressed shock that the greatest victory in Imperial history had been a lie. His second officer, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, approached quietly. That went out to every Imperial world simultaneously. There's no way they can suppress this now. Vale nodded slowly. Good. Let the truth do its work. Let them debate and argue and struggle with what their ancestors did. Let them feel even a fraction of the uncertainty our ancestors felt when the bombardment began. And if they choose war, Vale jaw tightened. Then we remind them why they feared us in the first place. But Sarah, I hope it doesn't come to that. We've seen enough death for a dozen lifetimes. Lieutenant Chen looked at the star chart showing Imperial space, so vast and powerful, yet suddenly vulnerable. Do you think they'll do the right thing? I don't know, Vale admitted. But I know this. They can't ignore us anymore. They can't pretend we never existed or that what they did was justified. The truth is out there now, and truth has a way of changing everything. On Kaldros Prime, as night fell over the Imperial capital, Emperor Zalrath stood alone in his private chambers, looking out at a city that suddenly felt very small. Somewhere in the darkness beyond his world, millions of humans waited for his answer, and for the first time in 60 years of rule, He genuinely did not know what that answer should be. The Empire's fear had just begun. The choice. The year that followed Commander Vale's broadcast became known across the galaxy as the Year of Reckoning. For the Chaldean Empire, it was 12 months of chaos, debate, and soul-searching unlike anything in its long history. The truth that had been locked away for 4 centuries now burned in the public consciousness like a star-gone supernova, impossible to ignore, and transforming everything it touched. Emperor Zalrath had not slept properly in weeks. The weight of an impossible decision pressed down on him with each passing day. His advisors remained divided. His military commanders prepared for war while his diplomats counseled peace, and his people looked to him for leadership in a situation that had no clear answer. The human broadcast had done exactly what Vale intended. It sparked conversations that the Empire had never allowed before. On worlds across Imperial space, citizens accessed the declassified archives and saw the truth of the Great Purge. They watched human families torn apart. They heard the desperate final transmissions from Earth as the bombardment intensified. They witnessed the systematic destruction of an entire civilization, and many did not like what they saw.
Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. Not everyone condemned the Empire's actions. Many still argued that humanity had been dangerous and the purge was necessary, but the debate itself was revolutionary. For the first time, Imperial citizens questioned whether their government had committed an unforgivable crime. Admiral Kess stood in the war room of the Imperial Defense Complex, studying holographic projections of fleet deployments. 300 warships now patrolled the borders, searching for human bases, attempting to track their vessels, preparing for conflict that might come at any moment. So far, they had found nothing. The humans remained ghosts, appearing only when they chose to be seen. "We've analyzed the Retribution's capabilities extensively," she reported to the assembled military leadership. "Their power systems operate on principles we don't fully understand. Their hull materials absorb sensor radiation in ways that make conventional detection nearly impossible. And their weapons—" She paused, pulling up classified footage from a border skirmish that had occurred 3 months earlier. The recording showed an Imperial patrol cruiser encountering a human vessel near the Terminus Nebula. The Imperial captain had attempted to engage, and the human ship had responded by firing a single weapon. There was no visible beam, no missile, just a pulse of energy that seemed to fold space itself. The Imperial cruiser's shields collapsed instantly, and its main systems went offline without any physical damage. The ship had been disabled, not destroyed, left drifting while the human vessel vanished into the nebula. "We're toying with us," Admiral Kess said grimly, "showing us they could destroy our ships, but choosing not to. Every encounter follows the same pattern. They disable, they demonstrate superiority, they disappear. It's psychological warfare." General Vorath, commander of the Imperial Marines, leaned forward. "What are our chances if it comes to open war?" Kess's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Unknown. We can't assess what we can't see. Based on the vessels they've revealed, they have at least 50 capital ships, each apparently superior to our own. But how many more are hidden? What other weapons do they possess? We're preparing to fight an enemy while blind to their true capabilities. Then we must find them," Vorath insisted. "Locate their hidden systems, their shipyards, their colonies. We cannot negotiate from a position of weakness." "We've been searching for 10 months, Kess countered. "Our best scouts, our most advanced sensors, our entire intelligence apparatus focused on finding humanity, and we have nothing. They learned to hide from us 400 years ago, and they've had all that time to perfect it." In another part of the capital, Ambassador Sellen met with representatives from the other species within the Empire. The chamber was tense, filled with beings whose ancestors had participated in the Great Purge or at least supported it. Now they faced consequences they had never imagined. "The humans are being unreasonable," complained Ambassador Torvik of the Shessian Concordat. "They expect us to simply hand over worlds that have been settled by our people for centuries. Those colony sites may have once been human, but they are ours now. And they were human first," countered Ambassador Yuli of the Kryn Federation, one of the few species arguing for accommodation, "before we took them by force, before we erased every trace of their presence. Can we truly claim moral ownership of planets we stole from the dead?" "They are not dead," Torvik snapped. "That is the entire problem. We thought we had solved the human question, and now they return with demands we cannot meet." Ambassador Selen raised her hands for calm. "The question before us is not what is fair or convenient. The question is what will prevent another war. Commander Vale has been clear. Acknowledge the truth, return some territories, guarantee protections, or face conflict. Those are our options. Or we find them and finish what our ancestors started," Torvik muttered darkly. The chamber fell silent. That thought hung unspoken in many minds, the terrible calculation of whether genocide attempted once might need to be completed. But Yuli's response cut through the darkness. "And if we try and fail again? If we murder billions more and still they survive? What then will we have become? What kind of civilization commits genocide twice and calls itself civilized?" No one had a good answer. Across the Empire, similar debates raged. On the industrial world of Targon 7th, workers argued in factories about whether the Empire should apologize. On the academic planet of Coruscant Minor, scholars examined every detail of the Purge, publishing papers that questioned everything they had been taught. On military stations throughout Imperial space, soldiers prepared for battle while wondering if they were preparing to repeat their ancestors' greatest mistake. But not everyone debated. Some acted. The extremist group calling themselves the Purity Legion launched terrorist attacks on Imperial facilities they claimed were soft on humans. They bombed a diplomatic complex on Viridian Prime, killing 17 and wounding hundreds. They assassinated scholars who spoke in favor of acknowledging Imperial crimes, and they spread propaganda claiming that humanity would enslave all other species if given the chance. The violence forced Emperor Zoltrath's hand. He could not let his empire tear itself apart while external threats gathered. A decision had to be made. He called for a final Imperial Council session, one that would determine the Empire's response to humanity's demands. Every major leader attended, knowing that what they decided in the next hours would shape centuries to come. The chamber filled quickly, tension so thick it was almost visible. Emperor Zoltrath took his throne, looking older than his years, bearing the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. "We have debated for a year," he began, his voice carrying through the vast space. "We have examined our history, calculated our military options, and measured the cost of every possible choice. Now we must decide." Admiral Kess stood first. "Your Majesty, I recommend we reject the human demands and prepare for war. Yes, they have advantages, but we have numbers, we have resources, we have 300 worlds united under Imperial authority. If we show weakness now, we invite not just human aggression, but challenges from every species that has chafed under our rule." "You would gamble the lives of billions on military might?" Ambassador Selen challenged. "When we cannot even find the enemy? I would defend our civilization rather than surrender it to those we once defeated." "We did not defeat them," Zoltrath said quietly, silencing the argument. "We attempted to exterminate them. There is a difference." He stood, his forearms spread wide. "I have read every report from the Great Purge. I have watched every recording. I have listened to the final transmissions from Earth as our bombs fell. I have seen human parents throwing children into evacuation ships, knowing they would never see them again. I have witnessed the systematic destruction of hospitals, schools, civilian centers, and I have had to confront a terrible truth. We were the monsters in that story." Gasps echoed through the chamber. An emperor did not speak such words. "Our ancestors told us humanity was dangerous. They said humans were violent, expansionist, unpredictable. Perhaps there was truth in that. But our response was not to negotiate, not to establish boundaries, not to find common ground. Our response was annihilation, and we nearly succeeded." He walked down from his throne, something he had never done during an official session. He moved among his advisors, looking into their faces one by one. "Now humanity has returned, not as the scattered refugees we made them, but as something stronger. They have every reason to seek revenge. They could have struck our worlds without warning, could have used their superior technology to inflict the same suffering we inflicted on them, but they did not. They asked for acknowledgement, for truth, for justice. They asked for our humiliation.
Governor Tresh protested. Admitting genocide will destroy our legitimacy. Perhaps our legitimacy deserves to be destroyed, Zoltrath said, shocking them further. Perhaps an empire built on such a crime cannot stand, should not stand. Or perhaps we can acknowledge our sins and build something better from the ashes. Admiral Kess's voice was strained. Your Majesty, you are proposing surrender. No, Zoltrath corrected. I am proposing honesty. I am proposing we become the civilization we always claimed to be, one that values justice over pride, truth over comfortable lies. I am proposing we give humanity what they ask, not because they can force us, but because it is right. The silence that followed was absolute. The Emperor of the Caldrian Empire had just advocated for acknowledging genocide, for returning stolen worlds, for accepting a species they had tried to destroy as equals. It was unprecedented. Minister Vex spoke carefully. Your Majesty, even if we agreed to their demands, how do we implement this? The logistics alone will be complicated, Zoltrath agreed. It will take decades to fully address. Some colonies will need to be relocated. Treaties will need to be written and rewritten. Our entire government structure will need to adapt. But the alternative is war against an enemy we cannot see, fighting to defend crimes that should never have been committed. He returned to his throne, suddenly looking every one of his many years. I am an old man who helped commit a terrible crime. I cannot erase what was done, but I can choose what happens next, and I choose peace. I choose acknowledgement. I choose to face the truth, whatever it costs. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Admiral Kess and several military commanders voted against, as did Governor Tresh and the more conservative faction of the council. But the majority, swayed by their emperor's conviction and their own growing doubts about imperial righteousness, voted to accept humanity's demands. The empire would acknowledge the genocide, they would release all historical records, they would negotiate the return of former human worlds, and they